It's December 14th, 2022. It's 5:03 PM. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 18 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. And item number 2 on the agenda is to review and vote on the minutes of November 9th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 9th?
I'll make that motion.
Roy? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have just one minor correction. The second Buffington is missing the G.
The second, the second time your name is on here?
Yeah, it's near the beginning.
I'm just looking to see.
Under number 2.
Oh, yes, okay. It's
But,
missing the G.
Yeah,
I thought you said the T. It's missing the
So-
G.
with amended, did we get a second already? I think
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so it needs to be amended. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
I'm sorry, Ray?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Tom McNamara? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So that's 9-0.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
You're correct, 8-0. 801. Righty.
801.
On to item number 3 of the agenda. It's to review of the draft of the fiscal year '24 capital budget and the 5-year plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Rich.
Great, thanks. I'm going to pass out the key documents to look at in enlarged format, so it's easier to read.
Great. Good.
This is the same thing that you gave us,
Yeah,
Peter and I, so I won't take them.
there you go. And I'll just hold on to these down here, so you're not tempted to rifle through them during the meeting.
You get
I
distracted.
think everybody can't wait to get their hands on it.
But this is the detail of, supporting documentation and requests and department-specific requests and things like that. This is already posted. I created a FY '24 town meeting and budget page on the website, and this is already on there. I think I sent you the link. And I already have these 3-hole punched. I'm just on the search for recycling some binders to put them in, which I do have some upstairs. I just haven't had a chance to clean them up for you.
Did everybody get a copy?
The other two extras,
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Joanna. Oops,
there's two.
So a bit about the process. Every year, in early fall, late summer, we send out the call to departments to let us know what they need for capital items, which is loosely defined as anything over $5,000 that is expendable in no more than 1 year, isn't consumed in an operating budget, in annual operating budget. And ought to be an asset of the town as opposed to like consulting type of things like that aren't part of the capital budget. So these are assets. And we go through and they give us a 5-year plan, and we rank and prioritize those requests, talk about need, ask them to document in the justifications with a capital asset request form, which is in the detail of this packet to the extent there's anything that's in the FY '24 request. We have changed up in the last 2 years a little bit of how we do some things. So for example, we don't ask now for what do you need for HVAC repairs versus what you need for a window replacement versus what you need for a roof patch or repair. Because invariably, you think you need the HVAC fixed, but then, you get a big leak in the roof, but you have no money for the roof, but you can get all kinds of HVAC stuff done, right? Because that's the town meeting voted. So we don't, get that fine-tuned on that now. Now we have on this page here that you're looking at, basically on the very top part, it says facilities and land. We've got each town facility listed, and we contribute money to it each year based upon, what we expect to be coming up for repairs. It was just me this year, so it's not as fine-tuned as it could be. We have, starting in mid-September, I think it was mid-September, a new DPW director. And we also just recently started a facilities coordinator. And so the idea is to work with those two folks over the course of next year to fine-tune this plan so that we have a relatively, hopefully, even amount of funding each year for each facility and in total. Similar to what you might see in a condo association, whereas, condo assesses you, the board assesses you each year for the operating costs, the insurance and the taxes each year of living in the condo, but they also assess you a capital charge, to put money aside for a big roof replacement or a septic system or, repaving the parking lots or something like that, that are all common areas. But the idea is you want to get that money from the people that are living there at that time and have that money available for you when those things happen, and not just wait for a roof to go and then send out everybody a, several $1,000 assessment that they may or may not have been expecting. So, same idea. Yes, Tom?
Rich, can I ask you a question? So this includes maintenance as well as capital. Is that true?
Well, what I consider, capital maintenance, it's a fine line.
Okay.
But basically, we're not carrying a lot of maintenance money in our operating budgets.
So, okay, you're not carrying maintenance in the operating budget. So they have to go to something like this in order to do some of the things you
Right.
just said. You'll get capital assets that someone might get approved, and you'll depreciate that over time. But then once it's all done, the maintenance of that is not really covered anywhere. It hasn't
If we ha-
traditionally been covered.
We have routine, recurring maintenance, things that we know we're scheduling every year or twice
Okay.
a year to do, that would be in the operating budget.
Okay, gotcha.
But non-routine, non-recurring, and non-annual items would be in here.
Okay, thank you.
And, the Finance Committee, many of you on the Finance Committee have more of a history than I do, but as I understand it, deferred maintenance prior to me getting here and, for the last several years had been an issue. So the last couple of years, there was a definitive interest in boosting maintenance, getting some of these projects done, and then maintaining our assets in our buildings on an ongoing basis, so we avoid that big deferred maintenance issue.
I'd just like to point out, probably the largest item on here is the town hall. And they have come to the Community Preservation Committee for monies to do that work. So if you look at the second item, crosses $650, and it's under CPA funds.
That was the, since I arrived, that was kind of been the thing that's been going on for a couple of years now. We tried to we got a bunch done, and I forget what you call the different components, but, not the roof itself, but the things around the edge of the roof got done with insurance money. And of course,
The roof was insurance
was
money.
done.
The roof was insurance money.
I might maybe have that backward. No, yeah, that's what I got backwards. We
roof
got
was
the roof done
insurance
with
money.
insurance money. Now we're looking to do all the soffits and venting and siding of the side of the building.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you anticipate all this funding will be spent if it's in the budget, or will it be carried over if it's not spent?
Good question. So, most of the money that we're currently requesting is planned, things that we know we need. But to your point, following up on what I just said, the intention here is raising an amount of money every year so that when a problem occurs, we can address it and not have to wait for town meeting, hope it gets passed, or have to cut it for something else. So there is a smaller amount, and then moving forward into future years, increasingly larger amounts
Right.
that we're appropriating money on almost like a level funded basis to put the money there so that we don't have to either A, have a big bond offering to do a big facility repair. It's almost like self-funding on a year-to-year basis.
Rich, is this something that you see over time with the new facilities manager and DPW perhaps too, is that you'll look at the total budget and say, hey, 35% of this budget should go for maintenance, and the rest of it, the 65, would go to actual capital acquisition?
Yeah.
I don't know whether 35 is the right number or not, and I'm sure that's something you'll look at when you look at all the assets that the town owns, I guess.
Well, the real, if we were doing this, 100%, professionally, so to speak,
Yeah.
Maybe you'd have engineering studies and reports done. That's costly. I don't think we're going to spring for those
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
But in-house with our in-house, DBW director and facilities coordinator,
Yeah,
a similar type of approach where, hey, we're scheduling out, we know within 10 years, these windows need to be replaced, or this roof needs to be replaced. Scheduling out all this work and making sure that the funding and the money line up so that on a straight line basis, we're providing for it, as
Yeah.
opposed to going up and down every single year.
Yeah.
Is the assumption that the 650 is going to do windows?
No.
So it's 650 to a brick building that has a new roof?
And that's an actual
No
quote. that-
windows?
And-
Without windows replacements?
And isn't that in addition to 300 that's already been?
No, no.
No, the only money that's been spent of CPA money so far on the town hall was an assessment to figure out what needed to be done.
There's a good explanation in one of the town administrator's reports about the work.
what the 60/50 is for.
The detail.
Yeah, and I should have thought of that, Rick. But there is a specific request to the CPC. So what I'll do is I'll forward that information to the Finance Committee, so you have it as well.
But there was, again, you're correct, there was an information, one of Jackie's
Right.
reports that you included in the packet.
I was going to go through this in summary, and then we can go back into some detail if you'd like. But the first section, as we just spoke about, is the facilities and land. The second section is the infrastructure section, and that's a little harder. That's the type of thing that is, depends on community wants and needs. So it's hard to straight line fund something like that. But there are certain things that we know that we kind of need to do, and the Rock Harbor dredging is one of those. We're kind of on the hook of doing that with Orleans on a 10-year cycle. We did an emergency dredging last year, and now I think we're in year 11 or 12 by the time we actually go to do this. That covers the cost of the dredging and our East Hands portion of the emergency dredging that Orleans covered that we owe them for, that we have a memorandum of agreement on. So that's our prior 10-year costs of dredging. The only other thing I have to say on that is that we do expect that to be sufficient amount of money. Right now, I have it listed as a bond issue, but Jackie and I are talking about, we do have money that was appropriated for this whole harbor master building that didn't get utilized. Then are we going to use that at all, or maybe do some, obviously not a building, but some other parking lot improvement or something like that? But there's likely some sum of money that we would reappropriate from that to reduce that borrowing need. We do also have, under local road improvements, money appropriated to make those improvements, but it's all contingent upon outside funding. And as you can see, I have some big amounts in out years, which are, at this point, just very tentative. Given what's in front of us, and we'll have this discussion as we go through this tonight and, next upcoming budget meetings, we got a lot on our plate, and, it would be great to say that we could do road work and road projects, but it just, given what else is on the table, that may, it might be one of those things that we defer. But to the extent we can get Chapter 90 money, or, Complete Streets grant, that's what would fund construction projects. So what's listed here is contingent upon grants being received. We know we qualify for the Complete Streets, and we know we can utilize some of this Chapter 90, but we do need to do some of the planning and design work on our own, which is why we've got $50,000 of free cash appropriated for the work on designing that.
Wasn't the Complete Streets, that's only about $500,000, I thought? That's not going to be
Pri-
enough.
Right.
So-
But the idea is that we would come up with projects in segments that fell within $500,000, which a couple years ago, was probably feasible to do, and now it's just not, because pretty much
Costs.
everything doubled.
So is the water system, are there any road replacements as part of that are still incomplete?
Jackie would have more detail on that, but as I understood it, the Phase 1 roads have largely been repaved. So the road work related to the water system is repaving of where the roads were disturbed or dug up for the water connections. What we're talking about here is actually reconstruction of intersections. Do you want pedestrian pathways down Samoset Road or bike lanes, things like that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about, I'm sorry, Russ, but I'm just wondering about just general infrastructure maintenance, things that need to be done, so you don't get to the point that you have to repave every road in town.
Right, so that's a great question, and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but if you were to flip the page, in about the middle of the page, to your point, Rayanne, there's a section there called DPW Recurring Maintenance Programs. And the very first line is a roadway maintenance program, recurring.
With no money in it.
With not any money this year, because we're still doing the water project.
Okay.
But then gradually anticipating, I just put a holding amount really of $40,000 a year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And this would be along the same lines of the facilities. We're putting a sum of money in there every year, and if it doesn't get used, it's carried over so we can do more in a future year type of thing.
Got it, okay.
I got a question on the construction of roadways. Is the drainage issue that we have in town, may that come out of that? Or would that be something that would be on the DPW reoccurring, which really doesn't have any money for it?
That falls under, it does fall under the DPW reoccurring, because we have a requirement to do stormwater
Right.
mitigation. So the line under the recurring maintenance program, stormwater system maintenance program, would handle most of our drainage issues.
Okay.
We could also do that to the extent it's contributor to our waste, nitrogen issues when we come up with the wastewater.
Does $50,000 a year cover the drainage issues we have in town? Because just on my street, we've got a ton of stuff that needs to be done.
I think we got to address the question of whether it's enough to address everything we have, but the other part of that, you also have to ask the question, how much can we actually do with our DPW staff in any given year as well?
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to make a big effort and contract it out, which would be an expensive proposition. But there's a, practical limitation of how much we could do on some of that stuff.
Yeah, so I just want to ask, new to this process, when something is a potentially really big thing, and I'm thinking of Bridge Road, Samoset, Dyer Prince Road, and the increased flooding and stuff, and future of like raising roads and putting bridges, that's obviously not in here. How is that planned for? I know there's been some planning, at least talking about the,
Yeah, we had some studies done on it was a low-lying roads
Right.
assessment, and all those roads you mentioned were,
right,
in the next 50 years, are estimated to be, or in some cases, maybe a little less than that,
yep,
estimated to be underwater. So, yeah, we need to do something
Yeah.
about that. Or maybe, and I'm just being a little bit facetious here, or the answer is maybe we're not going to do anything about it, and that's how you can just not do something,
yeah,
right?
I think Bridge Road, well, yeah. is
'Cause it's
the
too
one-
expensive,
it's the other evacuation route from the outer Cape.
It's gonna have to compete with
Yeah.
all the other
Exactly.
The other needs.
wastewater and all the other big-ticket items.
I mean, as we get
Yeah.
closer, this is a 5-year plan.
Yeah, that's,
And,
that's like huge.
And so anything that we think is on the horizon is in the, so as we move out years,
Yeah.
we would expect something like that to appear, at least as a placeholder for future consideration.
Yeah.
But I also have a thereafter amount, and I didn't mention that. It doesn't end up showing in what gets presented to town meeting, because the charter asks for a 5-year plan. But the thereafter is my attempt, with mixed success, but, we'll get better as we, departments and I go through all this stuff. But anything that's over $1 million, that's between year 6 and 10, I'm asking people to put under thereafter. It's not, you can't say that, what they're putting down, it's really just a placeholder. The amount's meaningless. But it's just to say, if we know that we need a fire station, for example, 7 years from now, I don't want you to not tell me that till it shows up in year 5, you know what I mean? give us plenty of leeway and time to talk about it.
Where's your thereafter section?
It's
Far right.
It's the far,
Gotcha,
the far
gotcha,
column.
okay.
So you see some big ticket items in here of
Okay.
just big amounts that I'm throwing in there to scare everybody so that we can make sure we talk about these things.
Senior Center, 10 mil, it scared me.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Raising the road at Bridge, you know, 149, wait a minute, what's the,
I absolutely
150
do not
million.
think, based on what you just said, that to take care of just drainage issues, we either have enough money allocated or enough staff available to do it. I think that needs to be looked at. I've been here 20 years, and the DPW budget has basically been flat for 20 years. It just doesn't add people. It's probably been the most efficient department in town. And I, for one, think that if we need to allocate more money for that department, it needs to be done to fix some of the road issues. I don't think it's adequate based on what I see. I do not.
And your point's well taken, as I mentioned in the beginning, especially even under the facilities. And I'm an engineer, I'm not a public works guy, and, you know, I can paint my house, but that's about it, you know, I can't. So I don't know a lot of these stuff, and so I rely on having a good process. And on these infrastructure things, we probably didn't have a great process this year because we didn't have a DPW director. We did have one the prior year, and that's where a lot of this information carries forward from. That's, you know, that's the extent of my knowledge of why we need it. So I kind of had to put this together on my own.
Yep.
Next year, John Ruffley will be much more involved, and our facilities coordinator will be much more involved in all of these things. But give him a chance to evaluate that.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of the things you're talking about, though, and there's another one too, and since we're actually on it, under the infrastructure, the first page here, town landings, you'll see we got some town landings listed, and it's not for FY '24, but in a couple of years, some big amounts for town landings. Now, again, that might fall away as a matter of priority with other things we've got going on. But if you're inclined to want to do it, you were likely to have some wastewater infrastructure work. And so my thought would be incorporate this town landing, which is really stormwater, you know, there's some attractiveness components to, you know, how you want things to look to it. But the main thing is the, you know, access and egress and the stormwater runoff associated with it. And so it lends itself to being included in an overall wastewater plan, as does a lot of your stormwater stuff. So,
Rich, are some of these covered by bonds?
yeah, so there are some codes here, and the codes are defined at the third page, or fourth page, the end of this. But I'll just tell you, anything FC is free cash. A bond is a BI, a bond issue. Chapter 90 is the state Chapter 90 allocation, if it's roadways. GRT means grant, so, you know, so we might have things listed in FY '24, and if it's funded by a grant, it's not happening unless we get that grant. What are the other one? There'll be an AF for ambulance fund, which we get under departmental equipment,
The cable fund.
and the cable fund for some stuff. Another item of interest under infrastructure, moving over to page 2. Tea Time, Town Center Plaza, COA sites, has money allocated to it to hopefully finalize the plans. Not on here, because I just don't have a sense of what it even looks like, but for the purposes of this meeting and talking about it, you know, the whole point of coming up with these plans and of how we want to move forward is to have some sort of request for proposal from developers to come in and actually do something. Now, that could go, you know, a number of different ways, right? But in a perfect world, the developer would love your site and think they could do a lot with it, and it would pay you money to develop it. You know, I wouldn't count on that one, you know. So that, whatever that ends up being, once we decide on what we're doing, will have to fall into this plan at some point. But a big ticket item that's on the plan for this year And we'll learn more in I think I'll learn more in a couple weeks, and then we'll have a presentation in January with the Select Board, is the status of our wastewater project. We're finalizing our draft targeted watershed management plan, which is a requirement that we essentially need to have. And that's going to indicate our options or our approach to remediating nitrogen pollution or other pollution as well. So we're anticipating needing to go into a design phase. It's not yet committing to doing anything, but we need to move forward that design effort, and that's looking to be upwards of $3 million, and that's a bond issue. So those are our two big items on this capital plan, is the bond issue for wastewater and a bond issue for the dredging. So it's about 4.6 million.
Rich, where do we stand relative to the other towns on the Cape, relative to the wastewater? Are we ahead of them in the planning at the same point?
We're behind.
Behind.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say we're behind.
All of them, yeah.
I mean, we are behind in the sense of things we're doing, but we're probably where we need to be or ought to be based on our efforts. And,
Okay.
you know, one of the approaches that our health department took, Jane Crowley, which I think was, very smart, was evaluating alternative approaches.
Yeah.
And so we have a
Permeable,
PR,
Barrier on the
PRB.
salt pond.
yeah, a permeable reactive PRB, a pilot, that's what I'm trying to say.
Pilot,
A
pilot.
pilot PRB project along Salt Pond by the visitor center. That proved to be effective, and that is going to be part of our final plan to extend that. And why, what's the importance of that? Well, it's less costly on doing that alternative solution than more sewering.
Yeah.
And so it's worth the time to evaluate that type of thing. The other thing we spent time doing, we have, and Jane could tell you more than I can on the details of it, but we had at least a couple innovative alternative IA septic systems at different places in town and evaluating the effectiveness of those. And use of IA systems in a later phase
Right.
of our watershed management plan is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah.
And again, the IA systems save money because you're not doing a larger sewer collection area.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because last week, one of the major news stations had on it a segment about wastewater and in the state, but then they jumped to Cape Cod, and they talked about all the problems on Cape Cod. So, if I was there not knowing anything, I would probably
You
be
think
a
that
little
we're
bit
behind?
scared. No, just as a homeowner, based on what they were saying, the impact to individual homeowners
You
were
should
gonna be.
Yeah, you should
No,
be.
no, I got it, but if they didn't have anything, knowing what I've heard from you folks,
Yeah,
I
it's,
know there was some work going on.
Are you talking about the cost of it, or?
Individual
as
costs,
far as your
replacing
taxes are
septic system,
concerned?
well, everything's gonna be impacted, right? But there's an individual cost as well as what the taxes could be, and this came across very alarming,
I don't want to get too far afield because, we got enough to go through on the
Sure.
capital plan, but it's kind of ties into the capital plan. And we will have other opportunities to speak to this with the select board, the finance committee, and other informational meetings. And they're not the same, they're different things, but they kind of come together. One is the nitrogen removal requirements for, various, what's called TMDL studies have been done since the year 2002. The other is there are new regulations that are draft right now, and that's probably what you heard on the radio.
Yeah,
That if you're in what's called a nitrogen-sensitive area, which in our case is, probably most of us, you'd be required, as an individual homeowner, to put in an IA system to replace your Title V within a certain amount of time. And there's obviously a big cost to doing that on your own, and that it's always kind of been the threat that's been out there. I was involved in the Mid-Cape and a couple of different towns' efforts on wastewater, and I never really wanted to push it, but it was always lingering in the background and I always called it the cost of doing nothing. You could be forced to do something, and that's what these regulations are.
Yeah.
And so the way, we can help our community is by having a watershed management plan, which buys us some time to not have to have individuals. But the plan has to be actionable, and you actually have to implement the plan. You can't just say you have a
Not good
plan
with
and
a
then do
plan, you
nothing.
don't do anything,
It's
right?
got to be accepted by the DEP.
And it's got to be, this whole process associated with it. But the theory would be, the cost of doing it as a community is, in the benefit that you're getting out of it, is more attractive than individually all doing our own thing.
Yep, agree.
So,
Okay. I didn't mean to distract you. Thank
that's
you.
right.
So, Rich, when I look at the anticipated funding sources across here, in terms of if you were trying to figure out the affordability or the impact on the town, up, down, am I right to really focus on the bond and lease issuance rows? The other ones, capital levy, we've kind of built in now that money will be available every year. The free cash, $1 million plus or minus, is how we've decided to operate. All the other things are sources that pop up every year. So really the variable to look at and to evaluate in terms of, you know, which bonds are coming off, you know, these would be new ones that went on, you know, is it up or down? Those are the two lines that are.
Yeah, the
that are
new
critical.
debt service that you're bringing
Yeah.
on versus how much are you dropping
Yeah,
off?
yeah.
And so, you know, to bring you all full circle, we've done this, you know, and some of you are new, so you might not have appreciated where we are in the cycle, but a few months ago, maybe just a couple months ago, we did a 5-year operating budget projection. And that included projected new debt service based on the latest, which was put in last year's capital plan. And I modified it for some other stuff, you know, I knew the school was in there and stuff like that. So, yes, you're right. This tells you the impact, but we actually discuss it and analyze it and look at it when we discuss in the, you know, early fall every year, the 5-year operating budget, which is going to reflect implementing this capital plan and the debt service associated with it.
I have a question, Rich. On the free cash where you show 1.3 million, if I remember correctly, on the work that we did a while back, we anticipate having 3.8 million in free cash available. About 3 million from fiscal year '22 and about 600 left over from the prior year, I think, for about 3.8. So obviously, that's 3.8 minus 1.3, that's 2.5. Are you anticipating keeping that for, be used towards wastewater, or how
Yeah.
is that?
Let me, Mary, I know exactly what you're saying, and so great, it's one of the questions I like to answer. But if everybody could go to the last summary page, page 4. What Mary's talking about is this chart down here.
This chart.
This is the summary of everything, the totals of the costs of everything, and the suggested or identified funding sources of it. And there's a couple of key things here. So to Rick's point, it tells you which years we're anticipating borrowing and how much borrowing. And based on that, when I go to do the operating budget projection, I can schedule out how much is the debt service on these bonds. So there's that. What Mary's asking is, the default, let me put it this way. If it's not a bond issue, if it's not funded by one of our other funds,
It's not a levy.
the default to any of this is free cash. And so if you look at this history, it shows that we have a recurring need for, you know, I'm just going to use nice round easy numbers, of at least $1 million of free cash each and every year for our capital plan. So we ought to be generating that much if we want to, you know, do this. Mary's point, if from, I don't know, it was last meeting or a couple meetings ago with our year-end review, we have anticipated about $3.8 million of free cash. So obviously more than the million or so that we need. So the question is, what do you do with the rest of it? So, and you remember in that discussion, why do we have 3.8 million? Well, we have 3.8 million because last year we didn't spend about 650. So we didn't generate 3.8, we generated 3.1, let's say. We anticipate probably keeping about a similar amount, about 750,000. It's just a standard reserve that we may carry over from year to year as part of our budget process. Last thing you want to do is spend all your free cash because it's the most available fund and source for you, and then have an unexpected problem come up in the middle of the year and have no way to address it. It also helps maintain our fund balance level, our general fund balance level. So we have always an amount that we don't put on the table. But the biggest thing has to do with the short-term rentals. Our short-term rentals this year is $1.1 million for the prior, or I should say the prior year, FY '22. And the policy of the select board has been that we're not to use the short-term rental money to balance the operating budget, except for as, agreed upon. And we've had a couple things that we agreed upon. Right now, our rental inspector that does inspections is, directly related to the revenue we've, so that's about 20 grand. That's paid with short-term rental. Housing position, half of it was funded from the rental money. But the biggest one is the debt service on the Town Center Plaza purchase of about $250,000. All told, we've got about, at the moment, about $320,000 of short-term rental money committed, which leaves about $800,000. If you committed 3 and you raised $1.1 million, you got $1.1 million, you got 8 left. And so last year, Select Board recommended and Finance Committee recommended and Town Meeting approved the $900,000 amount of the unused short-term rental that appears to us as free cash towards affordable housing. And so this year, that amount that's left over that hasn't been accounted for, that's adding to our $3.8 million in free cash, is about $800,000. And right now, that's an open question that Jackie and I will put on the table for the Select Board and yourselves at the joint budget meeting in January, is what's the approach? And so you've got a continued need for housing, obviously a big important issue, but now we are now getting closer and closer to realizing the need for wastewater. And not to speak for anybody here, but as my understanding of it is, and certainly the understanding of the state when they approved the short-term rental tax law, was their contribution to the Cape's wastewater funding issue. And so we're at a point where we have to decide what are we going to use that money for. Because to Rick's point, if you start seeing all these big bond issues on the books and now you got to start paying for them, I haven't worked yet on the funding plan for wastewater, other than to say that there's no way we can pay for it unless we issue bonds. But the backside of that is now you got the bonds, and that's going to cost you, say, $3 million a year in debt service. Do we just want to put that all on the tax rate? I would suggest no. We've got things we can do, like allocate short-term rental monies to it. We can participate in the Cape and Islands Water Protection Trust. Hopefully that's worth 25–30% of our debt service to us as a subsidy. And what are the other things we can do? So they're appearing as big bond issues, and left alone, they will have a big tax rate impact. But hopefully it's not 100% of a tax rate impact, because there's other things.
So
So this is-
short-term generation of free cash, you shouldn't spend it with a short-term view of, hey, I got some money. It's got to fit in with the long-term, what costs am I not going to be able to avoid, like a significant wastewater cost?
So last year,
And is it a priority to deal with a portion of that or not?
So last year, the decision was we could put all that to housing initiatives and needs. That might be the conclusion this year, I don't know, that's really a policy decision. Or it might reflect a fact that it should all go to wastewater because there's a significant need there, or it could be a balancing act and then some sort of transition, right?
But our free cash really looks higher than it normally would be, because you do have a short-term rental tax right now. The town really hasn't decided how they want to operationally utilize that every year. So that's what's really throwing the free cash out of balance. It makes it look like we got all this free cash, but under a normal planning cycle, that would already be
Let's
allocated.
hoping we get that bond rating upgrade before we have to,
Yeah.
Yeah, the what?
bond rating upgrade before
Yeah,
we get it.
there you go.
That's always on Rich's mind.
Or we might choose it to reduce the tax rate.
Did you have a question,
We
Russ?
don't have to spend it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Rich, is that the state already takes out 2.75%,
Right.
which they use for wastewater now, which is a fund that towns can go to.
Right.
You're talking about possibly taking out of our short-term rental and putting that additionally into wastewater.
Yeah, the state gets 6%, the town now gets 6%, and then there's another 2.75% that goes to this Water Protection Trust,
Right.
and I think that's it.
Okay,
So it's, about 15%
yep,
going to different places. We control 1.1, our 6% is 1.1 million, and then the Cape and Islands Trust, theoretically, by law, we're supposed to get out whatever benefit we contribute. We'll see how that plays out. The small towns here on the outer Cape,
it's called a cash grab.
I lost that battle in the beginning, but we'll see.
As did I.
I did, and I forget now what the language is, but there's some introductory language to the bylaws that they ended up adopting, and it had a recognition of the fact that the law says it must be an equitable distribution approximating the contribution. So it is in the bylaws that they adopted.
Rich, can you explain for FY 2026, the $60 million capital levy exclusion?
It's a bond.
It's a bond,
Is
yeah.
that a bond?
Yeah, bond issue.
Wastewater.
Yeah. Is that the placeholder for wastewater?
Yes, it is.
Are you looking at what page, Roy?
So if
The,
you're looking on the last page, it's the second item, but if you're looking on the
Funding sources,
second
right.
page,
Yeah,
it's the
60
top
million.
item.
Yeah, 60 million is, it's
Yeah,
the,
for fiscal year 2025.
and you notice,
26, really.
oh, geez, it seems like there should be another 60 million. Thought it was within the 5 years, but maybe it's at the thereafter.
Yeah, you've got it in the thereafter, yeah.
But there's another 60 million on the table, so that's a moving target too. That's presuming that we could do this in phases. If we can't, we could be talking something quite a bit more. And again, that's really just a placeholder. Like I said, we've got meetings planned coming up to kind of determine the order of magnitude of this thing. That will kind of define what this ends up looking like. Rick brought up a good point that I didn't mention in the introduction. If moving on from the infrastructure, we have the next section, which is the fleet inventory. Largely, it's a similar approach to the facilities. It's not uncommon, the police department would say, for example, I need to replace a 2012, Crown Victoria, I don't even think they call them that anymore, but whatever they call it. Unit J12. Well, then J12 ends up being in great shape, but J13 is a lemon and needs to go, but you voted the money for J12, so we're not going to do that. We appropriate money each and every year to a fleet replacement program, and the police is a good example, because they have a very good cycle. They're replacing 2 cruisers a year, and there's a lot of thought behind it, that it keeps the maintenance and repair costs low, which affects the operating budget. So in a periodic, ongoing replacement cycle, in this case, the patrol cruisers, frontline patrol cruisers are replaced every 4th year.
Are they electric?
He's got one, and he's evaluating that, so we're anticipating that, probably will get more.
Because of the price of gas, and that's what they used, obviously, to do their,
He wanted me to increase the budget because the price of the electric is more, and now the budget that we, on a level basis that we gave him wouldn't be sufficient. Eventually he'd run out. But that would represent a shift maybe from operating budget added to his capital, once we recognize that and can determine that. But
it
yeah,
seemed to me that it would be better to go the electric route than.
yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think he sent us something, and you might have even gotten it. I think he anticipates something between $4,000 and $5,000 of fuel savings per vehicle per year.
Depends on what the configuration of the electric is, whether it's a real savings or not. Depends on the nature of the vehicle and the cost structure and all that. Just because it's electric doesn't mean, A, that it's more cost-effective, and B, that it has a smaller footprint.
Yeah, I mean, you still got to charge it, and that has a cost, right?
Yeah.
So the fleet inventory, to the extent they're integral to the operation, like a police vehicle, the DPW duty trucks, the COA transportation vans, those are those are funded through our override from a few years ago. We got $400,000 to contribute to the capital plan, and that's part, and putting in the fleet, and then also in the equipment, is how we allocated that money out. So that's within our levies, that 400,000 is going towards fleet and equipment for the departments. So that we can stay current and have a well-maintained fleet. Anything that's not a routine replacement schedule, like a, front-end loader that you might buy once every 20 or some, in our case, maybe even 30 years, that's not funded that way. That's a specific request. We do have, I want to look at one section here. There's an add, and then there's a significant reduction, so hopefully you appreciate that. But this also goes to a question that Mary has brought up. But originally, we had planned, currently have 2 ambulances. And historically, the approach has been to replace both at the same time. There's merit to it, and there's, reasons why you might not like that as well. But that's what we've done. And that's what we contemplated doing this time. And we actually got that money passed. And then those ambulances will be in-house soon. They're on order and they're coming. But our chief has determined, and Jackie's wants to move forward on this approach, that makes a lot of sense to maintain a 3rd ambulance. And so instead of trading in one of the ambulances, we're going to retain the best running one as a backup. And that's why you see $30,000 under ambulance replacement this year, or $28,000, I should say.
28.
Because, if we follow that approach, we'll be short because we're not getting that trade-in money. We got exactly what we needed for the 2 new ambulances, but now we're going to be short the $28,000 trade-in. That's to add a 3rd ambulance. Doesn't mean we can staff a 3rd ambulance. We're not adding staffing, but we've got issues, when these ambulances need to be serviced and they're out of service for, a number of days, and then you're down to 1, it's becoming problematic. So that's an add, and so you'll see that going forward,
2 years.
we will be replacing, there's 3 ambulances on the schedule now instead of 2. We've got 5 or 6 years to contemplate exactly how that happens, so it might not happen exactly as scheduled here, but I wanted to reflect that within the 5-year plan.
Now, we're not buying them, we're leasing them.
It's essentially
I
buying,
didn't understand when you have, that's a lease,
it's a capital lease, it's essentially a financing. It's a lease to own.
lease to own, okay.
But the takeaway in talking to the chief, right now we run 2 engines and a tanker. Well, the tanker has kind of lost its usefulness now with the water system. So don't really need the tanker anymore. And we've been hearing all about this Quint for a few years now. That's finally, on the finish line and about to come into town. So the thought process there is, if we have the Quint, which has an engine, a pump, a water tank, and a ladder, that's the first new piece out. The second piece out is an additional pump. He doesn't think that we no longer have the need to have sitting around now a second engine, which we currently have. Right now we have 2 engines, 2 pumpers. With the Quint, we'll have the Quint, which is a pumper, a second pumper, and we will no longer need the 3rd. So if you were to look at this from last year to this year, we've taken out replacement in 2 years from now. A $500,000 engine is no longer in this plan. So, to Mary's, I don't want to risk of getting too far afield, but I know you'll bring it up later. So I'll put it on the table now.
Catching
You
on.
can count on that.
It's we still might have a need for that second engine. So let's say we get the Quint and we got the backup engine, and that backup engine, one of them needs to go out of service for maintenance, which is going to happen, and the Quint's got a ladder, so that's going to have to be tested and all that. Then you're left with just the one engine. Seems like you probably ought to have a backup engine.
How about another town?
But guess what? Orleans is kind of running the same way we are, and Wellfleet's running the same way we are. So it looks like an opportunity, right? Can you jointly participate And, you know, hey, Orleans, you need the backup engine because your mainline engine, your first due engine's out of service, you get the backup, you know, and move that amongst several towns. I think there's merit to that idea. We're nowhere near being able to implement something, but, you know, we want to have those types of discussions. And that would be the same discussion with an ambulance, right? So, do we need a third ambulance? Yeah, probably. That comes with some challenges and, you know, can you actually staff, if you actually had 3 calls simultaneously, could you actually get people anyway? You know, that, we gotta evaluate all that. But the fact is, we'll have it, and if we can end up sharing that, some sort of resource sharing arrangement with other towns, now we have an opportunity to do something like that. And so, you know, these things aren't happening in a vacuum without, you know, merit and other considerations. It's just sometimes those other things don't avail themselves to us right away, so, but we're working on them. If you go to the, it's the 3rd page now. That page is largely equipment. Again, for things, and the police departments, or IT actually is a better example. Every year I know there is network-type equipment, whether it's a router, or a switch, or a server, that needs to be replaced. And again, traditionally, a lot of towns would say, you know, replace the print server, or replace the police department IMC server. Well, then something else breaks, and you can't replace that thing because you've committed to doing the police IMC server. Well, again, we're just getting we've straight-lined, we know servers and network equipment lasts 7 years. So what's our 7-year cycle of need, and divide it by 7, and that's our straight line amount. And same thing on PCs. You know, if a PC's $2,000, and we've got, and I forget what adds up off the top of my head now, but you know, if you got 10 PCs staggered lives, and you know they're going to last 3 to 5 years, say 5 years, then every year you ought to be replacing 2. And for $2,000, then you should get $4,000 a year, so you can always continuously being up to date. And we're getting up to date, and we want to stay that way. So that's the kind of the process, or the pricing out of IT stuff. With one caveat, the stuff with the capital levy is initially was considered to be enough. But you'll see that we have the same thing. It says additional. Additional free cash, and probably, I'm hoping that that'll drop off after this year, and we won't need it for the next 5 years. But we had a severe increase in PC components and PC prices. Basically, prices doubled for everything because you couldn't get processors. And so the additional is a supplement, and hopefully after this year, that will just drop off altogether. And the amount that we appropriated under the capital override would be sufficient going forward.
Are most of our servers network kind of management things? Do we do a lot of, is a lot of the actual work done in cloud computing, or is it done on servers in the building?
You open a can of worms, Rick.
He's good at that.
We have undergoing a very big transition in our IT environment. And so one of the things we have in place now that just new from last year, but with the money, you know, that network money that was available to me, we've converted to what we call a host machine to host virtual servers. So we'll no longer need physical. We still have a need for physical servers in some locations for whatever IT reasons there are. I'm not a technical specialist here, but you know, I know enough to be dangerous. But to the extent we can host a virtual server, we would much rather do that. Has much better disaster recovery, operational maintenance, time involvement of staff. You know, so we are spending a lot of time and effort in the last year in the IT environment with the hope that it's going to have a long-term payoff in our annual costs, operating and capital costs. They're expensive things to buy, but they last a while. But we're also very sensitive to disaster recovery and backups. And so what we are able to do now, and we're not quite exactly where we want to be, but for example, if we know there's a big hurricane coming, or a big storm, or a big natural disaster event, we want to be able to operate. right now, if we get hit with a smaller event and we lose connectivity, we are now setting up failover to have another source of connectivity. But we also now, with the things that we have done with the virtual servers and with what we call a mass storage device, a NAS, we have the capability to take our stuff, and we could go to Plymouth, if we have an arrangement with Plymouth, and sit there and access all our stuff in the cloud. And we're also going, it used to be a big thing, and you'll see this in the operating budget this year. I've moved money from the licensing section of the operating budget in IT, and you'll see, I forget what I call it, but it's in a different section, reflecting the fact that we're moving away from buying licenses to have a program on a machine, and now we're buying basically a per seat. Everybody's in the cloud now, and if you want to have Office 365, it's $15 a month per person, and you get Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And so we're going through that whole evolution. And it's a lot of hand-holding, a lot of training, a lot of support to teach people how to go from how they've always done it to basically be working in the cloud so that our files are saved in the cloud, backed up locally, and we kind of got the best of both worlds. So we got to get all that to sync together.
Rich, are they also looking at cybersecurity needs of the town at the same time, making sure they're getting the right level of protection?
Yeah, it's huge. And I just had a meeting with our insurance provider, and they're very happy to know we are on top of it. So we'll have to implement at some point this year. It's on the agenda of stuff to do, multi-factor authentication. So we'll have to buy devices for people. I do it on my phone. Some of you might do it. If you have to log into something that says go to your authenticator
Code,
app
yeah.
and put in the code.
Right.
So you can't expect everybody to use their personal phone for town stuff. So we have to buy alternative devices to allow them to do that type of stuff.
Right. But, all right, never mind, I won't go down this rat hole.
But there's other things that we have too. We have endpoint detection systems now, and we also have much better monitoring software that will send out alerts if it detects something.
Someone trying to access,
Yeah.
okay.
Which we haven't had before, a lot of this stuff. It was just, we had it
Yep.
if we went in and checked for it, not a matter of rote, right? The evolution of that, and I don't think it's going to be reflected in this year's operating budget, but it certainly will be in a future budget, I'm sure. The wave of the future is to outsource a lot of IT operations, especially in the area of data security. And unless you're a really big city, most towns aren't going to have a 24-center network operations center, a NOC, available to them. But you can contract with somebody. All these IT providers have their NOCs, and they don't have people actually sitting there, but they will generate alerts, and there's always somebody in that company or that firm that's available, that's on call to receive those alerts in the middle of the night if something happens and respond to them.
Yeah,
And so outsourcing that type of work and having a response plan to be able to respond to it is kind of what we need to be doing looking to the future.
all right, that's good, because we've seen what's happened out in large not-for-profit organizations like hospitals and small towns, and people, holding hostage data until ransoms are paid. We don't want to get into that kind of a
And
situation.
I can't say we're, where we need to be yet, but we are vast improvements over the
Okay,
past year.
good.
I think that's a pretty good summary. On the very last page here with the summary of funding, I just want to reiterate the point that our capital plan does depend upon a certain level of free cash, or so. So I just keep reminding you that when we talk about our budgets and should we, over budget or under budget appropriations or local receipts, we can do anything you want, but it impacts free cash generation, which is what, and we have an identified need. Now, we might argue about whether we actually need some of these things or not, but we're in the $1 million range, plus or minus. The additional sheets is just kind of a ranking system. There's a whole system that's in this book, if anyone's really interested in seeing it. When I send out the capital budget instructions, I do ask people to rank things with varying degrees of success. But this basically lists the items on the table for FY24 and our ranking of priority and need for them, and any other ancillary notes. I wouldn't say this is even a finished product. As we go through and learn more information, we'll update this. So this is a draft budget, capital budget book for, dated on or about December 1st. Usually I put one out, a final in March.
Is the important more important than the desirable?
Yes.
1 through 4.
I'm very, actually, I want to say one other thing, because I'm very proud of it. This was in response to another finance committee many years ago that kind of raked me over the coals on, why did we need to replace a truck that had 200,000 miles on it and was 25 years old? And I said, I don't know, because the thing was broken. They didn't like that answer. Well, I'll give you a better answer, and I came up with this. So this is in the book. I have a whole vehicle ranking system that's stolen from the American Public Works Association to evaluate fleet, and should you replace something or not. And it's got a whole point system. For every 10,000 miles, that's a point. For, a certain amount of maintenance,
4 times so far this year.
right, a certain amount of maintenance, equals a certain amount of points. If you get over, I think it's 28 points, it marks it as red, it's, you should have immediate consideration for replacement. If it's yellow, it's like, hey, you're getting close, man. If it's green, it's like, no need to replace, but it gives, it's something less than what people felt was subjective. So,
Good.
is what it is.
So Rich, what you just gave us here was consistent with the operating plan you talked about that was, I guess, re-baselined or put together in September timeframe. Is that true?
Yeah, except technically, that 5-year operating budget projection is based on the most recent previous capital budget plan.
Okay,
As it
okay.
turns out, they're pretty similar anyway.
Okay, so it's similar but shifted due to time.
I mean, I knew the school was, I didn't know the school had this extra vote.
Yeah.
But I did know, we had the original school, so that was in the operating, but not the new thing.
So when you go through that operating plan, when you do your own rack and stack and say, we're not gonna be able to afford all this year, you make your own decisions, this is probably gonna come out of '24, and then do you decide at that same time, it just doesn't fall off the plate, someone's still gonna need there, you decide to replan it for '25 or '26 at the same time?
Yeah, and I got to talk to the department heads.
Yeah, sure.
But, these things that are on the table for '24 is what we're contemplating. We'll keep fleshing these out.
Yep.
But the things on this FY '24 column are what is going to be presented to you in terms of our Article 3.
At
B.
town meeting?
3A is the 5-year plan, 3B is the capital budget for this year with specific items that we're asking you to fund.
Okay. Thank you.
So based on your experience, the number of ones here, how does it stack up to the last couple of years? Can you recall?
For Easton, I think we're better. We had a lot of deferred maintenance. I can't say, I guess I'll pat myself on the back a little bit, but I like to think I'm very methodical and process-oriented. And that's why I set up these recurring funding plans.
Right.
To have the money when you need it and give you the discretion to the department head to make the right decision. To me, the decision to have the money or not isn't the right decision. To me, it's give you the money, and are you making the right decisions? And if you're not, let's correct that.
Right.
But like I said, been through lots of towns that appropriate money for the wrong things, and something else happened, and they can't address that other thing that happened, and they're losing productivity or money because they're just not addressing it.
Right.
And that seems like a crazy approach to me.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Rich on the 5-year capital plan? We will go on to Rich's comments on the fiscal year '24 operating budget.
Yeah, stay tuned for January 9th. It's a big night. Jackie and I, we have a draft budget in from all the departments. It's been compiled. I can tell you that it's balanced, such as it is, where we are, which I'll tell you what that means in a second. And we're preparing, we've got to tweak a few things, which we'll do over the next couple weeks, which will put us in a position, I think it's the January 9th Select Board meeting is a joint meeting with the Finance Committee.
I want to remind everybody that that's another joint meeting that's scheduled for January 9th. It will be a Monday at 5:30. We have 2 joint meetings coming up. We have the one coming up shortly, on the 19th for the Nauset Regional High School. Again, that's a Monday at 5:30, and January 9th is another Monday at 5:30, and that's another joint meeting on the operating budget.
So we'll present, where we stand with that at that time. The big outlier, that isn't any secret, we've been talking about this for, a year plus now, is this is our contract settlement year, so 5 collective bargaining agreements and negotiations right now, which I can't really speak to other than, they're going well. Good exchange of ideas, and you got to flush through them and come to some agreements and settlements. And those settlements could be at a price higher than what our levy can support in any one year. So we've been talking, we talked about it with our operating budget projection a couple months ago, and we've been talking about it. What's our approach to that? Whether we want to, the decision comes down to, do you want to fund those collective bargaining agreements when you're asked, in town meetings, asked to approve them? Or do you just want to get them approved and run the chance that you need an override down the road because of them? So.
It's every 3 years, correct?
Yeah. So that's a, so that's a philosophical thing, but absent those settlements, pending settlements, we feel at this point we've got a balanced budget that we can present, and we will, and we can go through the mechanics of that on the 9th.
Do you know where the town meeting is going to be held this year?
I know Jackie's been working on it, but I haven't been in on that.
You probably just said this, but when is the collective bargaining agreements going to be finalized? Don't have a date?
We can all agree on stuff.
Before January 9th?
No, we'll be in the spring
So
sometime.
it'll be a moving target.
I'm up, all things going the way, we hope they do, it would be in the spring sometime. But, you can't make anybody agree, so if people just don't want to agree, then you got to go through the process.
Do you put a placeholder in from a fiscal standpoint?
Must, right?
So what I've done in the operating budget is we do know there's going to be increases because people have step increases.
Right.
So to the extent we know those are in. What I don't know is the cost of any cost of living adjustments, and so there's no provision for cost of living.
What do you know from other towns or from what you've been hearing on other people that are going through this? Any thoughts or ideas on what they're dealing with?
Yes.
Yes, leave it at that.
It's not good.
Talk about that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Any questions? As I said earlier, and Rich said, we're on for the January 9th meeting. It's another joint meeting with the Select Board to discuss the operational budget.
Was that originally scheduled for the 4th of January?
I'm sorry?
Was that originally scheduled for the 4th of January? No?
No, I don't think so.
I think I might have put it on the schedule that I sent out to you,
Oh, is that what, okay.
so I was just putting in dates similar to the
Placeholder.
prior
That was
year.
the placeholder, and actual is going to be the 9th. Got it, okay.
We have a regular meeting on the 11th, which is 2 days later.
Yep.
I'm going to go on to item number 5, update on capital projects. And I did provide in the packet updates from Jackie for the past 3 weeks, the last 3 select board meetings, I should say. She sends them to me prior to her meetings. And so Ray Ann had a good idea. Instead of putting them into the packet like I did this time, when I get them, I think I'll just send them out to you automatically after I get them, rather than keeping them and sticking them into the packet.
This is a lot of good information.
So you can, yeah, they have good information, and you'll get it when.
And Mary, the one dated November 21st is the one that contains a narrative about the improvements, the requested improvements to Town
Town
Hall,
Hall,
the
yeah.
description
Right,
of
right,
what,
right.
not with specific dollar amounts, but
Right,
all
right.
the different things that
Yeah,
are being
right, yeah,
targeted
yeah.
for anybody that wants to look at that.
Yeah. And so I'm going to go on to item B under 5, and I'll let Peter talk about it. It's the Nauset Regional High School, and hopefully you have all received information regarding the voting that's coming up, and on January 10th. And that's, as I said, going to be the basic discussion of our meeting on the 19th with the building committee. So I'll let you,
So that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
I think
what you wanna say?
we talked about it last time, and not much has changed. And we, at the big meeting on the 19th, to answer any questions. There is, I think there's some more current information on the building project website that people can access. And yeah, the vote is going to be in person at Town Hall on the 10th of January, at all 4 town halls, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., I believe. And early voting is going to be possible for those that register for it, but no in-person voting ahead of the election day. So that's
You
where we
get
are.
a mail-in ballot.
yeah, I got,
Yeah, the mail-in applications have gone out. Yeah. So you can mail, yeah, there'll be mail-in
Yeah, yeah,
voting, but
mail-in
not
voting.
early in-person
Right,
voting
right,
like there
right.
sometimes is.
right. Yeah. Well, maybe I shouldn't ask this question, I should wait till the 19th, but have you, in your meetings, been discussing the ramifications for each of the 4 towns as far as the 38 million is concerned? I know it has to do with the population of the towns, but
Right.
to have some idea of how it's going to impact your town and your taxpayers.
No, I mean, there hasn't been any discussion in the meetings. Rich might have an idea. I don't know if you've done any work on that.
Yeah, we can get that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be based on the school population on, I don't know, October 1st or?
Yeah, so it changes every
Every
year,
year.
but
Right,
Mary-
I know
Mary-
it changes every year, but they set the number of, like, on October 1st.
Yeah.
And that should not change by January 10th or
Right.
any other time. So,
Right, but there's still some variables. I mean, it depends on, I don't think the school committee's decided, or I haven't heard that they've decided about what length bond they're going to,
That's another.
they're going to
one of
go
my
out for. And
questions.
they're kind of holding their fire on that, I think, to see what the situation is when the project's finally approved. And so it could be a 25-year bond, 30 bond, so that'll change the,
right,
but I think Mary's point is she'd like to have an order of magnitude for what it would cost the average taxpayer in Eastham, or the median household value or whatever, for each of the 4 towns.
right.
And I did pass that question along, and hopefully people are working on that. But I don't have
Well,
an answer for you.
if not, we can derive that. So it's, we're roughly, and I can get the exact number, but roughly 20% of
20%.
38
Yeah,
million.
20,
Our town is about 20%.
Eastham's about 20, yeah.
So what's that look, what's that extra debt service add to our tax levy? We can figure that out.
Well, that information won't be on the ballot.
No,
Mm-hmm.
The only thing on the ballot is going to be the 38 million.
And actually, I think that's a, requirement of how that needs to be written. Don't think you're allowed to, because everything's an estimate, so you can't, have the wrong thing. The only thing that's known is the total.
38 million.
But when we approved the 100-something million,
131.
130, right? There was some information that was shared that said, this is the approximate
right.
of what would be your tax increase to the average home, that type of thing. So wouldn't there be some estimate like that would be able to be given to people for this incremental amount that they're being
Sure.
asked to approve?
Yeah, just a calculation, really. I
Well, they're
think.
gonna do it in
Yeah.
total, and they have it in total for the new amount, I believe. So you could do a couple things. You could just take the new amount and then
Here's
look at
the
the
new
old
one.
one and say, here's the increment, right? Or I could just do it for you, which is
It's
probably
going to be a
easier.
25 to 30% increase.
Over what it was, yeah.
Over what it was.
So,
Yeah. So I'm really And it won't happen this time, but I really don't understand why we haven't been able to get Provincetown and Truro to start paying for some of the capital costs. And the contract that we have with them is just for basic tuition.
Well, because they have to agree.
Oh, I know.
Great to say that, and I, understand the sentiment, but, that's the, I have the same sentiment when we're talking about collective bargaining. We always reserve the right to say no, right?
mean, do
You don't
they-
have to agree with people.
Does the contract give them a better deal than school choice or not?
Yeah, no, they pay more than school choice. School choice is 5, and I think last I understood, the contract was about 22.
For Provincetown.
Yeah.
Rain probably knows more than us about
Yeah,
this, but,
so-
they pay a tuition, so this is always the rub. What's the per pupil cost of Nauset high school education? And I don't know the exact numbers of, but if it's, say, $20,000, what does a Truro student who's not part of the district pay for tuition to come in? Are they paying $20,000? Are they paying, something less? Are they paying something more? And, if you're paying more, then I'd say that's your argument that, hey, I am paying capital costs then, right?
So they're paying for a guaranteed spot, right?
But they're not part of the district, so they don't, so, district agreement would have to be amended, DOE would need to approve it, and, the enabling legislation didn't include them. So to add them to an agreement, they would have to agree, and the DESE would have to approve.
And the voters would have to agree, and that's where, given the population of the town and the number of kids in the town, you're going to find a real push from a community like Truro. I can't speak for Provincetown, but that would be the issue.
Do Provincetown and Truro pay any capital costs for the tech school?
Yes, Truro does.
Because they're by the
Part of the.
school agreement when it was formed, they're part of the school, tech school.
So they pay.
They pay an assessment based on student enrollment, just like everybody else
It's
does.
very low.
They don't have a lot of enrollment.
Right.
No, because of the enrollment, but they are paying for part of the capital. I mean, it's a new building, so
Yeah.
there's capital cost there.
Joint schools met on Monday, and they did a whole presentation on what each town would pay, graphs and charts.
Oh, okay.
So that's available on demand if people want to watch it towards the end. It's on demand, and it just shows,
What's this?
that's the show number.
Okay.
I'm just bringing out to them that the joint schools met
Thank you,
on
Wayne.
Monday, and they did a whole presentation on the high school and the costs. And per town, and for a $400,000 house, it'll increase this much. And so that's all on demand. It showed 3214, Joint Schools Committee, just met Monday.
Great.
Good presentation.
Thanks, Wayne. Didn't know that.
Why were?
So how would we access that again?
I don't know. Why?
It's on the
why
town
weren't we-
website if you go
Yeah,
to
is that 3214 is the show number?
It's the show number, it
So
said, yeah.
Yeah, you go to the town's website and you go to the TV, and then you put that show number.
3214.
And Rich, if I may, for clarification, the vote on the 10th will be the way that the bond council writes the question that you have to either vote yes or no to. That's all that can include. So anything that you received earlier was probably part of what, I'll call it, what I know from previous jobs in explanatory text.
Right.
That helps explain what the vote is about. But there probably isn't time to get that out now, so this is probably the best source.
I wonder, I'm surprised that we didn't know about that meeting. Any other comments, questions, et cetera, on the Nauset Regional High School? Oh, I have a question, Peter. I got something here today. They're trying to raise money for the school.
For the,
All I want for Christmas is a new high school, and I get this thing asking me to send in money to pay for the school.
to pay for,
38 million.
I am requesting a small donation, possibly whatever you can afford to help fund voter information drive, get out the vote operation.
I think
Oh.
it's for the voter information drive, not for the
Oh, I know,
school.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But if the there's any left over, they'll put it.
Think of it as a Christmas gift to future I just thought that was a bit much.
Who's it
That's
coming
just-
from?
I'm sorry?
Who's it coming from?
Came from the head of the,
Head of
School
the
committee.
school committee,
yeah,
Chris Easley.
That was mailed to your house?
Yeah,
it was emailed.
The email. So I don't know who would have gotten it. Don't give
I got it, you got it.
I know it. I'm just totally shocked. Okay.
Thought it was some sort of prince from halfway around the world.
I'm sorry?
Thought it was a prince from somewhere halfway around the world.
Yeah, right, right.
Nigerian guy, yeah.
Okay, so we're on for the meeting for the 19th to discuss it with the select board. Rock Harbor, really all we have on that is the dredging thing, is the
Yeah,
1.6
it's,
discussed
regarding
earlier.
the project, the CPC project, we haven't met since August. And I know behind the scenes, Shayna, Jackie, I'm sure have been doing some things, but as a group, we have not met. Again, back when we met, due to the additional dollars that were going to be required and some of the other complications, we said we're going to just kind of take a step back and look at alternative approaches.
Yeah, the focus really is, as I mentioned earlier, is on the dredging. And so, you know, what is it that we think we need to do there that we could use the previously approved money for? And to the extent we're not going to repurpose that to reduce the borrowing costs for the dredging.
But wasn't that grant, you received grant money for the,
Yeah, that
for the
does-
building, you can't use that for the dredging?
No.
No. Okay. Let me see, to wastewater, and we have talked about the Title V regulations and the issues
Yeah.
associated with that. I don't know if there's really any
Yep, there haven't been
questions or
any
comments.
capital projects committee meetings, so I don't have much to report on that, other than, what we've talked about, and that now they made the presentation to the select board, the consultants, and now they're working on this final draft of the targeted watershed management plan, which I guess we're going to get sometime in January.
That's the way I
Yeah.
heard it at the last meeting. Any comments or questions on the wastewater issue? And water in just in general, I'll let you comment if you have any
Yeah,
comments.
there's not much to report because our meeting is Monday morning. But going back to the previous meeting we had, one of the things which shows up very prominently in town is the repaving of Herringbrook and Massasoit Road and the little part of a campground in between. I think from nothing more than driving on one or both of those every day, they did a hell of a nice job. They really did. And they got it done without disturbing the populace very much. I think it was a great job. But everything so far is going quite well. They repaved a lot of roads, certainly off of Nauset Road on the north end of it. That went very smoothly. So
We're getting there.
we're getting there. And, next thing they've got to do is to lock down what the cost of the new tower will be, which will be over on our property behind Nauset Road. So there should be an update on that on the Monday meeting.
Have you driven by down Nauset Road to see where they've cut through for the well?
They pushed in a road.
No, I didn't.
Oh, it's unbelievably huge. They had huge equipment in there, trees, and, it's just a mammoth entryway down there.
Now, is that?
It's almost across the street from the Council on Aging.
Council, yeah, I don't go by there very often.
Yeah, no.
And but I will make a point of it just
it's
to take
huge.
a look.
I thought they were putting a neighborhood in there.
Affordable housing.
Well, yeah, you never know. I was surprised when I saw the size of it.
Yeah.
Okay, on to item 6, old business, the town charter status, and I believe we are moving along. We've received back information, and we've returned our information, and maybe our,
Through the Senate.
I'm sorry?
It's through the Senate into the House of Representatives. So they're revoting.
So what's the timing, do you think?
2000. It's only been 2 years now, so
Oh, I know, it's insane,
hopefully it's imminent.
yeah. We won't hold our breath. The master plan, it was, are the people from the master studio folk, are they going to be giving any presentation on the 19th as well? Do you know, Rich?
No, well, the plan was,
I thought it was, yeah,
the plan was that they were,
right, but now,
not now.
okay,
There's some work that still needs to be done on the district plan. So Jackie really didn't feel they were ready to present to us. So right now, we're looking probably the second week in January or something.
okay, second week in January?
The next, one of the select board meetings in January.
Okay. Select board meeting in January. All righty, and now we're down to the goals for fiscal year '23. And I guess my first comment on that is, do people, given the fact that we have a charge, obviously the Finance Committee has a charge, and to my knowledge, we've never put together something like the goals for the Finance Committee. I guess my first thought is, my first question is, do people feel that we should have something in writing regarding our goals? Or do you feel that the charge that has been given to the Finance Committee in general is enough without putting something additional in writing? So before I get into a discussion on goals themselves, I just wanted to get people's thoughts on proceeding with doing something like that, or whether people feel that it's not necessary. Russ?
Mary, my feeling is on the side of maybe not being necessary. I think if we start out with what our goals are, is we've got to start out first, is what are our objectives of these goals? And is it something that we can implement, or would it have to be something that we have to work with all the other committees in town to get implemented? So that's just kind of where I stand. Number two, I'm old and I'm lazy.
Any other thoughts, Joanne?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but I do like the, that reminder of here are the strategic planning goals, in the context of what the Finance Committee is going to be doing. I think it is important to look at those again, and so how would we, and if we're setting our own goals, I agree that we're an advisory group, and I like, actually, Tom, what you had submitted to Mary on, supporting the other groups in recognition of what these strategic planning goals are, I guess so how do we make sure, I agree, I don't think we should have separate goals, but we should have something that says, we've looked at this, and we're going to support, the groups that do have these. I mean, recognize that we recognize these strategic plan goals. Does that make any sense?
So Mary, I think my thought was, everything has to be consistent with our charter. And our charter should be also to support the select board. So if the select board's not getting what they think they need out of us, they ought to tell us. The idea behind the goals should be consistent with our charter. okay? It doesn't mean that we're gonna do everything in our charter, accomplish everything in our charter in 1 year. But my thought was there should be 2 to 3 things that this committee is gonna take some leadership role on, because, you know, as Russ just said, if we're just supporting everything, how do we claim success at the end of the year? You know, oh yeah, we went to this meeting and we supported that. And we went to this meeting, we supported this committee, and we supported that. What do we own, if anything, in terms of our charter, back to the select board or back to the town for that matter? And are there 1 or 2 important things, 2 or 3 important things that we collectively agree should be a priority for next year to help the town move forward with its strategic plan and its responsibilities? So that's just my thought. You know, that's where I come from in the business, you know, on the business side. It's usually, you know, here's the mission of our business. Here's a charter in the case of this committee. And in the next year, these are the 2 or 3 most important things that the Finance Committee is going to focus on in order to contribute to what its responsibilities are back to the town and the select board. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, you know what I mean? My feeling is if we're just here to support and check boxes because we went to a committee meeting or we held a meeting, you know, we're kind of rowing the boat, but nobody's really owning anything. That's where I was coming from. And if I'm wrong, again, I may be wrong, but please push back.
Mary, may I?
Yeah, sure.
So I think that we need to be careful because the strategic plan ends up in policy as set by the select board. And a lot of what the town operational staff are responsible for is implementing that policy. So our role, in my opinion, is to support that. And we can all believe some of them are more important than others. But I think our role is more financial in nature. You know, we're looking at, for example, this 5-year capital plan is looking at a significant amount of debt overrides based on bond issuances and a huge impact on the taxpayers, of which we all are. So my feeling is that we might be more useful if we helped to determine at some point what citizens in town are able and willing to pay for, or at least feel like we're giving citizens a voice, even if it's one-on-one, to what they're feeling about all of this. I know that I can't speak right now for anybody other than myself or the couple of people in my neighborhood who might have talked to me. So maybe that's something that this group should consider doing, or holding an open meeting. And I don't mean to step on the select board's toes in saying that, but we're a finance committee.
I agree with you, and kind of that's what I was trying to do with like the RTE. You know what I mean? There's, you know, I sit at the table, I'm the only part-time, you know, resident here, so I can't vote on the 10th as an example. But, you know, when the RTE seems to be a very emotional and passionate thing that a lot of people in town, you know, talk about. And I think, quite frankly, part of that emotion is they don't have all the information, to your point. So is there a way that we could partner with things like the 1,500 members of the Part-Time Taxpayers Association to try to help address what it is that people are really trying to get at through the RT, just as an example, you know what I mean? And then, again, we don't have the authority to make something like that happen, but then to provide to the board what we learned and what the options might be. The reason, you know, to your point, Rayanne, is there's a lot of other resources out there, people who are passionate about this town that want to contribute a piece, even if they're not full-time residents. And those resources could be brought to bear to help address some of the challenges we're having, maybe in different ways, at an affordable way, like affordable housing, you know what I mean, that we might not be looking at. And bring these people on as partners. That's really what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak a little bit from my experience as a town manager on the Outer Cape. I think that we're very, very precariously edging into policy and operational issues when we start talking about meeting with groups like the part-time resident taxpayers. I think those are simply policy issues, and that we need to take our direction from the select board and the administration in ways that we could help. but I really believe that our focus is financial and should be on the financial. And while I support the strategic plan goals, I don't feel it's my responsibility to implement them. I think it's my responsibility to offer my opinion to our esteemed finance director and this committee. So I just think we need to be careful where we're walking with
That's fair.
some of this.
Okay, so you see it more as advisory.
Yeah, I do.
And Ray, I agree with you 100%. The frustration of working on a finance committee is that you don't have any authority, but you have influence. I mean, it gives you a place to talk to the issues. I stayed on the finance committee these last 8 or 9 years primarily because of the water, and then the Nauset Regional School. And I got things done in select board meetings, like getting, it was myself and 2 other guys, finally got the select board because we talked at Citizen Speak every single meeting about getting the Phase 2 done. And finally, the chairman of the BOS at that time said, "Oh, all right, we'll put it on the agenda." And that made that was a lot of work, but you had some influence because you had a position from being on the committee. I got back on the committee for the Nauset Regional High School, and I got back on it because I wanted to push it. I was afraid that there were people on the finance committee that were drinking a little bit of the Kool-Aid that was coming out of people in Brewster on this financing of school choice, which was absolutely wrong. And out of that, I wrote a letter to the editor in the Cape Codder, and I had the editor call me up, and she said, "You seem to be very certain of what you're saying." And I said, "I've got the backup data," and I sent her 30 pages of backup data, and my letter turned into a featured article in there. And I think that helped influence some people, those 2 things, because there were people on the finance committee that were a little on the fence about this cost of the school choice. So if you're willing to put yourself out there, you can make a difference and you can change votes. You can absolutely change votes. So I think it should be done on an individual basis. My humble opinion.
Comment?
Yep, no.
I like the flavor of these in terms of, and I think it goes, I think the decision on this type of objective or not, goals, would fall back to the select board whether they want to use FinCom this way. Because what this says is you can use FinCom as a resource to get some specific things done that relate to the strategic plan that normally would probably be done by the town staff, right? That may or may not have time to do these, or may fall not on their priorities when you're trying to figure out how to get everything done. So I think the question is, does the select board want to use this committee in this way to get some things done that may not get done until a little later versus an opportunity to get done now? And I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know, what the select board's opinion would be on using FinCom this way. But that's how I look at it. I don't look at it as asking FinCom to set some policies. I look at it, if the select board accepted this, they would say, okay, this fits with the strategic plan and the policies we've got. We want to try to use this resource to move these balls down the road.
So can
That's
you,
kind of how I look at it.
can you give me an example of what you mean by,
They may say, okay, the town's liaison with the Part-Time Residents Taxpayers Association, we do a few things, I'm not familiar with what's done in terms of liaison, but if the select board felt, gee, we want to improve that, we want to take that to the next step, are we going to have Rich et al. Spend more time on it? Or gee, do we think we could use the finance committee to move that ball a little farther down the road?
Okay.
That's how I would.
I understand what
That's
you
how
mean.
I would look at it.
Yeah, not making policy.
Right.
Bringing forward recommendations to other people like Rich and the select board that would have the final say, regardless of what we recommend. Because in the end, I think, we don't set policy, as you said. and
So
we don't-
it is using this committee a little differently than it's traditionally been used. And I don't know how, I don't know whether that's viewed of value or would view of, diluting this group's activities. But that's how I view this.
It'd be, interesting to hear from, Rich and maybe the select board, are they getting what they expect to get out of the thing? Is there anything we could do to help you guys be more successful? You know what I mean?
That's how I would look at this.
Would Art like to make a few comments? Or no?
I think the first place to start is with Jackie.
With what?
The first place to start is with Jackie.
Oh, yeah.
agree.
yeah.
Talk about what kind of help that you could, this is personally from my standpoint. I don't think the select board is as well-informed and spends as much time as they should on the financial matters. I think we look at it a very, very high view, okay? But I don't think that we're really intimately involved in the finances. We kind of depend upon Rich and Jackie and you guys. So I think, this is once again my personal opinion, I depend on the finance committee to look at what we're doing, tell us whether it makes sense, how we should do it, et cetera. I don't think that I'm really looking for the finance committee to come up with programs or policies. But hopefully, the finance committee acts as my insurance policy. Because we aren't that intimately involved in the finances. You guys are. You really know what's happening, and you know better where we're spending the money than we do, okay? And we may make a policy decision that says, we want to use the rental tax for things other than this. But you guys are the ones who really get into the details of where the money's going and how we're using it. And that's what how I look at it. And we've had some warrant items where the finance committee votes against it, because the board said, no, we're gonna do it anyway. But I think it's kind of, as I said, it's like, kind of like, you're a backup. You're the ones that tell us, this is right, this is wrong, we would agree with it. And I think that's your function now. That's my personal opinion. You talk to Jackie, she might say something different. You talk to any one of the other select board members, they might say something different.
I'd like to bring up one area that I think that needs to be looked at in particular, and it has to do with the fact that we are getting to the point where, and you mentioned it, Rick, we've got the wastewater coming, we've got the Nauset Regional High School coming, we've got the salary contracts up for renewal, we've got the Rock Harbor dredge, 1.6 million. We're still paying for the tech school. And I just think that, oh, and our basic budget is essentially, this past year, coming up, 35 million. 30 million of that is to be paid from the taxpayers. 5 million is coming from other revenue sources, but essentially 30 million of it is coming from you and us, you and I. And I am very concerned about how we're going to, how the townspeople, the taxpayers in town are going to pay for it going forward. My own assessed value of my house went up 33% in this last year. My taxes obviously went up similar. So I am concerned about how we're going to proceed as a small town of 5,700 people. And I think all the other towns on the Outer Cape obviously are going to be having similar financial issues. They've got wastewater, they're going to be paying for the Nauset Regional High School, they're paying for the tech school. Orleans is paying for part of the dredge. So I'm just wondering whether we should be looking into trying to work with the other towns out here from a more regional perspective to be able to afford to continue to have the things that we want to have here. And is there a way for us to learn how perhaps whether there are other areas that have done something from a regional perspective? And I was chatting with Rayanne the other day, and she was back in Hartford, where she used to work. They did have a regional type of environment there for some of the towns there. And so I'm just wondering whether there is somebody associated with that operation that would perhaps be able to zoom in and talk to us on how that regional operation worked, how they put it together, how they ran it, what were the impacts of having it? Did it make a difference as far as the regions that were involved? Because I am, part of the strategic plan is to have young families in town here. I think the median cost of a single-family home here is over $600,000. No single family can afford a home of that size. So we need if we're going to have affordable housing, we need density. We can't deal with the issue of housing by a little house here and a little house here and a little house here. So it's got to be more dense, and if you're going to have something dense, you've got to have wastewater. You can't have affordable housing and without wastewater. So I'm just wondering what people's thoughts are on just listening to somebody that might have put something like that together and see how it worked, how they did it, whether it made an impact. I'm giving my thoughts on my concerns from a financial perspective for the town of Eastham.
But I think there is a sustainability issue that is being exacerbated by the inflation over the last year or two. I mean, if you go back to when I moved into the town 15 years ago, whatever, and I look at the inflation rate on my tax bill over that time, and now I've got anticipated continuing inflation on my tax bill to pay for this stuff. And now I got the inflation on everything else I buy. And how is that sustainable for a pretty big segment of town?
I think 60% of this town is over the age of 60. And on many of them, like myself, on a fixed income. I mean, I don't work anymore.
Rayanne, was your experience in Hartford County?
Yeah, my experience was with the Hartford region. There's no county government in Connecticut.
They're just administrative units.
Right, so
Yeah,
it's
geographic.
Capital Region Council of Government, but we had a very active one, and we actually did multiple regional initiatives, including some technology. But I also worked for one of the rim towns of Hartford. I worked for Weathersfield. And we had a collaborative with 4 of the other towns, Newington, Rocky Hill, Berlin, and Cromwell. And we actually did a bunch of shared resources. We, for example, Newington hired a dog catcher, and we paid for half of that. We hired a tree trimmer, and Newington paid for half of it. So, and there are certainly things like that going on. If you read today's Cape Cod Times, there was a discussion of, or maybe it was yesterday's, multiple Outer Cape things that are going on in terms of coastal resiliency and the health department, for example. So there is some of that going on, but I think it might be interesting to hear from the director of CROG, who is a friend of mine. He might be willing to Zoom into a meeting. But I also think if we're going to do that, that Jackie has to be on board with it, because now we're starting to march into basically administrative responsibilities. But, and I also want to caution, and this is from experience both in Connecticut and here, regionalism doesn't save your town money. Particularly here on the Outer Cape, what it's going to do is continue to allow the towns to provide services. Because there will be a point at which, for example, none of the towns can hire firefighters. I think we're almost there, right, Rich? And so if we're going to continue to provide fire and ambulance service, at some point, those towns all need to start to say, okay, how do we do a regional? I can say this now, so I won't be hung, but,
Yet.
yeah. I think I mean, we're in a tough spot, right? We don't have housing that people can afford. We don't have workers to fill the necessary jobs. We have wastewater issues that our friend from the health board can share with us. And, and there's tax increases that we're all facing. So I'm glad I'm not a policymaker.
Good point.
Regionalization is actually one of the goals. Jackie's had it as one of her
Yeah.
goals. Supporters has as one of their goals, to look at ways we can regionalize some different things.
Yeah.
I know Rich and Jackie had some discussions with Wellfleet in the area of finance at one point in time. We are having ongoing discussions with Orleans on wastewater. I mean, I think regionalization is one of our goals,
Yeah.
to try and do that, because we recognize we're going to have to. So it's not like it's being ignored.
Right.
We made a lot of progress, so we are talking about and working on it.
Yeah, and it's not something that happens overnight. I mean, some of the health department stuff was stuff I worked on with Jackie back, now I've been retired 2 years. Pardon me. So it's a long-term, because you've got to get everybody on the same page, the policy leaders, the administration, and the staff. And the staff are often the hardest to bring on board.
And I was going to say, and to that point, I think that's a great point, and Mary and I spoke last week, just getting prepared for the meeting, and that was one of my comments. We lack, it's hard to get, some things may make sense, and you might be able to pull them off, and you might be able to do them, but you need somebody that's going to lead that effort. And individual town administrators or individual department heads don't have the capacity to go beyond what they're doing, more likely than not. And so, if you're not willing to spend money now to save a little bit of money, or at least continue operations, to your point, in the future, a lot of times the things aren't going to happen, because they don't have anybody driving force behind it.
But shouldn't that be part of, that would be part of the overall process? You got to show what the benefit is to those stakeholders, the ones that are going to have to lead it. They've got to be able to understand that this change that we're asking them to implement is going to make life easier for them, more affordable for them, allow them to do something else, or something they can't do now. as a result. I mean, I saw this in the federal work that I was involved in for 4 years. To your point, the hardest people to implement change were the people who were there every day, from administration to administration. You know what I mean? They don't want to change the way they're doing
It's the
work.
path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And so unless you have somebody in there to be a change agent, or to force them to think differently, or force themselves to ask themselves a question, it just doesn't happen, because
Yeah.
because they're getting charged from their select boards or their communities to do X, Y, and Z, and either it's happened or it hasn't happened.
Right.
And I know costs on the finance committee is important, but a lot of these folks just want this stuff done. And if you're, I'm not saying this is an example, but if you're Orleans and you gotta get wastewater done, you're getting it done, you're not waiting on Eastham to come along.
Sure, sure. Sometimes to implement change, though, you got to dig a few holes and fall in a few holes, you know what I mean, in order to move forward.
But when you're operating on a 3-year contract as a town administrator with divided select boards, stepping into too many holes is problematic.
Well, that's where, but those are the pitfalls I think we've got to help recognize and help overcome them, you know what I mean? So that Jackie, whoever gets the top cover they need in order to help, hey, we're going to have a problem in the short term, but in the long term, here's the benefit that we're going to get to. And in a time and an environment that we're all going through here, and whether we're a 5,000, population town, or whether we're a 70,000 population town, I mean, we're all going through these same struggles right now between inflation and taxes and what's the cost of doing business, and you've got to be able to do things differently. Just like, Rich was talking earlier, you know what I mean? They're moving now to putting their data up in the cloud, in a secure environment. You know what I mean? Because why? It's cheaper, Those things got to trickle down in other areas. If we don't change, we're going to pay for it in the long run.
And I think the other thing we have to remember is that this town doesn't have any large businesses in town.
Right.
We don't have something that we can go to. It's us.
Yep.
So back to, without going through this much longer, should we, maybe Peter and I should sit down with Jackie and just talk to her about our discussion here today and see what her thoughts are on putting something together with getting somebody to chat with us, or?
I'm not sure. I mean, CRAG is a totally different animal than what's here. I think Jackie's got a working knowledge of regionalizing that would serve her well. But see what she has to say.
Yeah, so maybe you and I can just sit down sometime, and what are people's thoughts on next steps?
I think that's a good idea. Sit
I do
down with
too.
Jackie.
Yeah,
And
Get Jack-
perhaps Rich.
Well, I was saying, it is,
Yeah,
to the extent, it's part of that strategic plan, and it is something that's always on our mind, and always, it is, believe it or not, sharing the resources and regionalization, so to speak, we're always looking for opportunities, but, you gotta have willing partners, and that's the challenge. So,
Yeah.
but it's part of the strategic plan, and if it's a recognized importance to the finance committee, then I think we should address it. I just want to comment on a couple things I heard, though, is, we try to do a good job to give you the information you need and be ahead of the game, and keep you educated. But what we're really looking at is we take seriously that the finance committee's charge involves voting on every single article at town meeting. You've got, to Russ's point about using your influence, that's important to Jackie and I. We just, last year was a good example. We had a questionable decision, philosophical decision about an override or not an override. What are we trying to do here? And getting your support was important, and that affects how we prepare budgets and provide, the information that we provide for you to help you make that decision. So we do take it seriously, and I think that's a really, important part of what you're talking about here, is to recognize that you kind of do have a lot of influence, and we consider that in what we present to you.
Okay, so I think that if everybody is in agreement, Peter and I will work out some time to meet with Jackie and including Rich and discuss what we've discussed here, and then bring back our response. And I do think that when we do have our regular meetings, which is, they're going to be coming up shortly, when we meet with the police department, when we meet with the fire department, when we meet with the DPW, or whatever, I think we should do our best to ask them how they could perhaps do things with the other towns to make them work better from a regional perspective, when we meet with them and talk about their budgets.
I think that's a great point, because I'm sure they already have discussions with regional, other towns, you know what I mean, and their peers in other towns right now, and have thought about things that might work well, might not work well, you know?
Just for your information, I asked, because last year I did ask about one individual that was on the budget, and I think it was the police. There was an animal control person that was.
There was a great shared resource until we stole him to become a police officer.
And in Eastham, and I asked about it, because it was on the budget for $30,000, and I said, why is this animal control person here for $30,000? And Rich responded and said, oh, because we share an animal control person with Wellfleet, so we're paying $30,000 towards the animal control person that we're sharing. And the next comment he made to me was, we
Not
just
sharing it.
hired him ourselves.
Because now he's a police officer.
Yeah, and Eastham's really good at stealing stuff.
I got a kick out of that.
Well, as many of you know, I came from the healthcare side of things. And in healthcare, there was a lot of stuff like this, out of necessity. You know, reimbursements down, all those issues, costs up. What can we do to keep the boat afloat, keep providing quality care, all of that? Everything from consolidated departments and sharing people,
Sharing
purchasing on a
purchasing.
regional and national level. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So the question is, what would be a good fit for the towns? And I think it's good to, the idea that you talk to the people that are, even when we have in these budget meetings. What do they see?
Yeah.
You know, certainly the fire department knows the issues that they're having relative to finding people in the first place, right?
Right.
So, yeah, you know, it might take a little bit of creative
have to do
thinking,
a little
but
pushing here.
they're close to it, sure.
Yeah.
I just would caution, though, that I think everything you said is great, because I think sharing resources and those kinds of things, they're good, but in my view, they're shorter-term benefits. You know what I mean? If you really want to position ourselves, I think, for the long term, we have to think disruptively, you know? We have to make people uncomfortable with doing things differently, because otherwise, if we just do increments aren't going to keep up with probably the cost of doing business. You know what I mean? So what are those disruptive solutions that we don't have to do tomorrow, but maybe we have to plan for them in 2 or 3 years? They're really going to position us to execute this master plan that we want the company, want the town to actually realize. Otherwise, we're just doing it bit by bit, and I'm not quite so sure we're going to get there. We're talking about this every year.
Okay, so I'll end this conversation with, as I mentioned, I'll try to set up some time for Peter and I to meet with Jackie and with Rich to discuss this further, and I'll let you all know what the result of that meeting is. Okay, we don't have a town administrator, so I won't ask her to report.
She's just not here.
He's sick. I'm sick.
As I said, I did put in the packet the last 3 reports that she sent to me, and I'll plan on doing that when I get them. I'm down to number 8 on the agenda, the new business, and I just want to thank Roy. He went through all the hurdles and all the paperwork and all the meetings and all the things that you've got to go through, and so he has now been appointed and approved for the Strategic Planning Committee.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you, is there any, I know the original reason why everything was sort of delayed was because they were going to be looking at their charge to change it to more members at large versus appointments like yourself. Has there been any update on changing the charge or nothing?
I think they're still working on it, is that correct?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Roy is now our strategic planning committee appointment. On to B, when I reported a couple of months ago that Amy Hackworth had resigned from the search committee. And I've been in touch with the search committee. They didn't have anybody in their line of volunteer applications for being on the search committee. So we're sort of at a dead end there. And I did, I found a friend who I thought would be somebody that would be interested in being on the search committee. And she did meet with an individual from the search committee, and she also was interviewed by Peter. You have her volunteer application in the packet. And so I'm going to ask Peter to just give his comments on her.
Well, we had a meeting for Diane Matfeld with the, let's see, it was the chairman of the search committee and another member of the search committee and select person Suzanne, select board.
Brian.
member, Brian. And me. And, yeah, Dee seemed very interested in serving, and the search committee was happy to have her, and so we recommended to the select board, I guess is how it works, that she be appointed.
So I need to have a motion to,
I'll make a motion to appoint Dee Matfeld
We
to
recommend
the
to the select board.
search committee.
That's right.
do I have a second? Rick? Do I have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
9-0. I will notify her, and I will notify Linda Sassy for the select board. And the only other thing I have on here is that I sent out to everybody in case they were
That's
interested.
not true.
I'm
You
sorry?
You have number 9, too.
I have number 9, 2. Oh, about the adjourn.
To adjourn.
To adjourn, yeah. But first, I have number C. I just wanted people to know that the open meeting law, there's a webinar by the Attorney General's, and it's tomorrow from 11 to 12:30, and I sent out to everybody if they're interested or not. And so is there any other comments or information that people would like to know? Go ahead, Rayanne.
Will we have a schedule for our budget meetings coming up soon?
You're talking, it's on, do you have the original?
You
Yeah.
talked about
it's in
your
there.
next regular meeting in January after the budget presentation.
Okay,
Will be kind of like a planning meeting to get your schedule set.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, whatever? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You do.
Do I have a second? Joanna, all in favor?
Aye.
9-0.